23rd. Welcome everybody. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. And my phone bill is $185 this month. What the hell, man? Must have been a few international callers, I guess. They add up. You can call anyway. Calling's good at 709-589-4406. Lots of beating to be given out tonight, so let's try not to waste any time. We had a poll last night. Should the International Atomic Energy Agency be charged with omnicide against Earth? I know where this creeper, you can find him too. Wherever there's bicycles. Just a credible horror of the New Brunswick nuclear power plant station getting a renewal for 10 years. They just had a 5-year renewal, but you got to remember this plant in the last number of years has been shut down constantly and spending tens of millions of dollars on constant repairs. And it's got decades of reactor cores, so it's hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. It's just shocking. A decision released Wednesday from the Non-Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Currently, 5-year license will expire on June the 30th next week. And so did anybody really think they weren't going to get their extension? Probably the most pathetic thing about it was the fire department, local community says they're ready to deal with a nuclear meltdown. They can handle it. Well, get your ass down to Fukushima, moron. And then tell us how ready you actually are. New Brunswick Power has requested the commission, New Brunswick Power, so it's a government entity, right? Grant an unprecedented 25-year license. That's the amazing thing about this is they wanted a 25-year extension with no checks and balances in between. No, just trust us, the nuclear industry. You have to be insane to trust the industry. Old cement, old technology. The whole site is bombarded with neutrons. Everything is fragile. These are pressure reactor vessels, so say 1,000 psi. So when they let go, think of your car tire at 1,000 psi and blowing up. Then think of these big facilities full of nuclear fuel for decades of reactor cores going poof all over your entire continent, not just your countries. NASA. They should get rid of NASA. NASA is full of inbreeds. It's completely dysfunctional. Decades of inbreeding, and they hire their own. Now it's like some kind of weird circus. They haven't done anything in decades. They're completely dysfunctional. NASA selects 3 companies to design a nuclear power plant for the moon. So it'll be 58 years since they went back to the moon if they come in on schedule. How come they haven't went to the moon in 58 years? It's just about the nuclear industry. This is all this is. So all the science magazines can have a headline. NASA is going to put a reactor on the moon. The whole story is absurd, by the way. And it's from Gizmodo on top of that, so it has zero credibility. The winning concept will be ready to launch by the end of the decade. Really? You think somebody in the nuclear industry could do something in 8 years? Come on. Let's be serious here. State parties to treaty and prohibition of nuclear weapons. So you got multiple nuclear reactors melted down, hemorrhaging radiation all over the planet, and everybody's worried about what might happen instead of what's happening and is already happening. We got a poll tonight. It's a rather unique poll. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. How about that? The nuclear industry is not stupid. They got rid of all your freedoms and your ability to control them a long time ago. Should Congress and Parliament have the authority to make it a crime to poison you with nuclear fallout? Because it's not illegal to if it was illegal to poison you, they couldn't open a nuclear power plant anywhere on the planet. And most nuclear power plants are in farmland. That should be reassuring. Not. That should be reassuring. Where am I here? 225. So we got 16 votes with 16 people on the site. 100% people says, yeah, they should have the authority to make it illegal. Only the nuclear non-regulatory agencies have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with man-made anthropogenic radiation. And so just a very small amount in your body is attacked for the rest of your life by these white blood cells. This is two new nuclear power plants that they're building, they're planning on building in the United Kingdom. What's interesting about both of them is that they're the same color? No. That they got telephone poles? No. That they're by the coast on the ocean, Dana? No. Come on, try harder. You're not trying hard. Both of those plants got something in common. What is it? They're good farmers? No. They're built in farmland. And what that means is people that eat the food, well, you know, dead man tells no tales. Where do we leave off here? That story, this story, this story. Yeah. Okay, let me go back to this. No, this story here. So you got two new nuclear power plants, and both of them are surrounded by farms. So the first thing the engineering department does when they're going to plan a nuclear power plant or dump is, where's the best farmland? Because the majority of nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. So if Congress had the authority to make it illegal to poison you, they wouldn't be able to build nuclear power plants in farmlands. And there's something about farmlands and the nuclear industry that just can't stop themselves from being evil. I got no idea what's going on, but when you put farmlands and nuclear together, it spells EVIL. Where are all these nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? What the hell is going on there? So future nuclear power plants surrounded by, you guessed it, pizzas. No, farms. Look at it. You're going to tell me that's not the strangest, kookiest shit you ever seen? I got to say, that's some pretty weird shit, isn't it? We'll cover that coming up later. State parties to treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons to adopt an action plan. Which is interesting. I'll show you why. To study risk posed by nuclear weapons and their adverse effects on humanity. So they're not worried about all these prefectures in Japan shipping food worldwide. No, they're worried about what might happen if a nuclear weapon goes off in the same places. So if you're not totally confused, then we're not talking about nuclear, are we? Growing concern Russia could use nuclear weapons, surrounded by NATO countries with nuclear weapons. And you think it's going to stop at 1 or 2 weapons if it does happen? So if they do have a nuclear war, we blame Zelensky for not surrendering. The last nuclear plant in California, and the unexpected, really, somebody was unexpected to save the last nuclear plant. Really, somebody really thinks the nuclear industry wasn't pulling in every favor to try to save that. To force them to keep it open, basically. What a weird story this turned out to be. Diablo Canyon began operating in 1985, but the neutron bombardment was too much, and it kept failing because it's fragile. It makes like steel and rebar and everything brittle. Brittle, high-pressure reactor, not a good combination at all. Actually, that's a terrible combination. The plant has faced controversies over its impact on underwater ecosystems. The production of toxic waste and its proximity to earthquake fault lines. Climate crisis, which is radioactive fallout, is the reason we have climate change, is decades of reactor cores hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. That particular sweetie is the radioactive fallout projection from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research of the Xenon 133 covering the northern hemisphere and the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, they were conservative. The French's model covers the planet in just 16 days. Ow. 16 days, bad. Oh, hang on here. I almost forgot. I forgot. Let's keep it rolling. A diverse league of advocates. These are pumps for the nuclear industry we're talking about, by the way. Energy officials, scientists. Scientists' reputation is never mind. Mama always said, you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. California's governor and even the musician Grimes are pushing for renewed life for Diablo Canyon. So a musician Grimes, we'll have to look into that creature. Meanwhile, critics say keeping the plant open would be a step backwards. Well, thanks for giving us a little plug out there, scumbag. Roughly 2.5 billion gallons. The seawater sloshes through. Sloshes? If it was just sloshes, we wouldn't be talking. Cooling hot steam. It boils off the water each day up those water cooling stacks, those big stupid looking ones. That looks like that there. That's the water cooling stacks. It's not sloshing, it's boiled off. Has a profound effect on the ecosystem and animals and fish and sea lions and turtles and other creatures killed by the millions each day, actually, not year, according to the California Water Board. Facing requirements for upgrades and retrofits at $4.5 billion, which means $9 billion, $10 billion, right? You'd have to double anything the nuclear industry says, and that's being conservative. France's reactors are coming in 4 times the price, and they're still a decade and a half behind schedule. No, we got this. California urged to keep nuclear plant open to meet climate goals. A nuclear plant can't meet climate goals. It's absurd. These are the same people that goes out and pisses against the wind over and over and over. They still don't figure it out, eh? Nearly 80 weirdos and kooks. 80 scientists and academics. I actually got a whole bunch of them for you. Of the people that they're actually talking about. Hang on. Because there's not that many, when you think about it, there's not that many of these academic scientists worldwide in the nuclear industry, right? I actually got a list of them. Hang on. Scientists, doctors and scientists and academics. Come on, computer, don't be slow. Don't be, didn't press the button, Dana. What was the search for that? Oh yeah, hang on. Hang on, because this is worded, trust me. I haven't had a few laughs in a while. Tonight might be your time, right? I don't know. It usually pops up for me. Maybe I'll try again in a... there we go. Oh yeah, we're rocking now, baby. Let's run through just professors tonight because there's a lot of them. Former professor convicted in a bribery case. That's probably one of them. Yeah, 80 scientists. Let's look at some of these people. A professor convicted of assault and battery. That sounds about right for nuclear. Convicted of raping a 13-month-old baby. That sounds like a typical professor for sure. And you'll agree with me by the time I get through a bunch of these. When research becomes rape. Professor convicted of DUI for the third time because I'm better than you. I had such a good time, officer. Professor convicted of falsifying retirement assets, theft by swindle, sex crimes, wife's death, Ivory League. He was from Harvard, I thought, that guy. Oh, another professor convicted of exposing himself to multiple women. Another one convicted of poisoning his wife. Because a professor is better than me and you. You know that, right? Professor Annie's wife convicted of fraud from $700,000 NASA contract. NASA got the money by fraud in the first place. Professor convicted of spying. Convicted of arms export professors. Harvard Medical School professor abused 4 of his female patients. A psychiatrist abusing female patients at Harvard University. What's the world coming to? Convicted of sharing technology. Convicted in child porn case, professor. Defrauding the students, professor. Millionaire ex-MIT professor. Former Harvard professor. $600,000 theft from a Hong Kong jeweler. Former Florida State professor convicted of embezzlement. Professor convicted of torturing his wife. That's sex for grades. Law professor. The pinnacle of society. You gotta suck my dick if you want a big grade, bitch. I'm a law professor. The world is tough. My daddy was a nuclear scumbag. His daddy was a scumbag. I'm just a scumbag. Like it's just something, right? Defrauding, first-degree murder, Kansas State. faking vandalism, retention. Jewish professor convicted of making child porn. My God. Convicted of manslaughter. Convicted of scrawling polite graffiti on people's cars. Using a screwdriver. Convicted on child pornography charges. Sure is a lot of professors convicted of child porn, I noticed over the years. But he filled up a yoga ball with cyanide, his wife's yoga ball. Almost got away with it too. Morgan State University convicted of threat. Convicted former professor admits abusing boys, like little boys. Some, like all professors, you might as well put them on a sex registry as soon as they're hired. Oh, you want to be a professor, eh? Convicted wife cyanide killing. Besting $600,000 for the students, from the students. Something else in it. I'm trying to get to the end of it. So when you hear academics and professors, remember, the majority of them are batshit lunatics. If this is how many they caught, how many got away with it? Running a drug house, defrauding students, setting fires. Because sex for grades is not enough thrill for him. He was just doing it for fun. Former Stanford professor convicted of tax evasion and theft. K-State professor convicted of murder. Does this ever stop or what? Business professor convicted of tax fraud. Geez, is anybody surprised at that one? Oh, agreed to pay $100 million civil penalty. That's tax fraud on a whole different scale. It's like maniac. Convicted of hiring a hitman to murder his daughter-in-law. And he's convicted of murdering his ex-wife. University suspended 45-year-old chemistry professor after groping the little students. Harvard professor convicted of defrauding couple. Child porn. Early childhood professor was a pedophile and lives within 1,000 feet of a junior high school. Totally coincidence on top of that. Morgan professor, grant frauds. A law professor convicted of punching out a 70-year-old taxi driver. Over $20 fucking dollars. Excuse the language. Oklahoma State professor. So every university got a couple of crazies that are going to get caught. The rest of them are smart enough not to get caught. Michigan opera professor, husband charged with sexual assault in Texas. Marietta professor convicted of a slew of child porn charges. Convicted of attempted incest is just one of the shady. Nursing professor convicted of bank wire fraud. Professor charged with attempted murder of his wife. Complete coincidences. All these criminals are professors, by the way. South Korea professor convicted of faking a Yale degree. God make it end, Dana. East Bay professor convicted of baby sex abuse. Convicted in bribery. The threat of climate change is real. The crazies, eh? And so this creature over there, she works for Michael Schellenberg. Is a pro-nuclear lobbyist, and he gets women. She started up the site, Join Our Clean our Save Clean Energy rally. She's from Brazil, by the way. Organizing demonstrations in the United States against closing nuclear power plants. Chicks for Nuclear, but they only got 180 followers, thank goodness. But Mother for Nuclear's got 5,500. So I got them on my spam list. Make sure I spam the fuck out of them. That's my patriotic duty, right? Save Clean Energy only got 48 subscribers. She said, this is the cutest news I heard all year. Nuclear plants protecting the environment and restore biodiversity. Hang on. That's the opposite of what nuclear does. So like, the nuclear industry is actually insane. Closure of nuclear power plant will lead to prolonged reliance on gas plants and energy sources that producing damaging emissions. Well, the fortune cookies here really are more accurate. Mothers for Nuclear. These are incredible scumbags. If there were mothers and they knew they work on nuclear plants on top of this, they knew how bad, you would expect them to be against nuclear. How can you be pro-nuclear? It's just wrecking the entire planet over 75 years. It's a death sentence at this stage. Gas, oil, and coal don't cover the planet in invisible plumes. Radiation is the only thing that does that. If your coal plant breaks down, they're not going to come out with plume models of the coal plume covering the planet, okay? Because it doesn't exist. You'll never see a model, but this model is a plutonium-239. It's not even supposed to be on planet Earth, plutonium-239. Nuclear power is poised for a comeback. Really? Last year was 290 gigawatts of renewables came online. It was 1 gigawatt of nuclear. So 290 gigawatts of renewables is about 333 large nuclear power plants, the animosity equivalent in energy, in 12 months. So between 2020 and 2026, 6-year period, renewables is around going to be, by 2026, 4,800 gigawatts, which is equal to 5,500 large nuclear power plants in just 6 years. Currently, there's 440 power plants on the planet. Majority of them are old and decrepit and past their lifespan and already have extensions and rebuilds and can't possibly last much longer. And it would take 50 years just to replace them. Why would you, though? Because, first off, the nuclear fuel hemorrhages radiation into the environment from the fuel pools. Once you start putting fuel in the pools, you kiss the planet goodbye. So you got to try to stop it for the future generations. You can't just... We're at the precipice of an extinction event, and it's caused. It's absurd to suggest gas, oil, and coal emissions can heat a planet. When you look at how nuclear works, the plumes cover the planet. This model is 20 days. It's just 20 days of plumes. Gas, oil, and coal doesn't do anything like this. This plume is pulsing energy for millions of years at 186,000 miles per second, but you can't perceive it or see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or feel it or touch it or pick it up. And therefore, most people, it doesn't exist, which is the opposite of how you're supposed to be reacting to this lethal threat against everything with replicating cells. They have lost their expertise in building reactors. France, the country, plans to build up to 14 new full-size reactors. No, that was because of elections. They were going to elections. Nuclear industry is very powerful down there and very influential, and so they had to sit there and get elected. They don't, once again, they don't have the expertise. They can barely build a reactor in the United Kingdom, the EDF, right? Let me keep her rolling there. Government wants nuclear energy, carbon-free electricity to tackle climate change. This is a Freudian bargain. You can't fix the climate with what the problem is. These plants are always hemorrhaging radiation. They have been doing it from nuclear testing to nuclear dumping. This stuff is all splitting the atom. It's just my not last video, but the video before actually broke down all kinds of different sources of radiation pollution into the environment. It really gets you up to speed in a hurry. It was an hour and a half video, but the last half was just me talking about other stuff. The first hour was just pure, brutal documentation. Ex-colonel carried Putin's nuclear codes, was found shot in Russia. He's gravely ill in intensive care. His brother found him in a pool of blood. A retired colonel of the Russia's Federal Security Services, which used to be known as the KGB, when the Soviets... these are crazy. So who knew? Somebody probably got him back for crimes against humanity years ago, no doubt. This is nuclear industry, though. Air Force Chief, better acquisitions process helping nuclear triad. So nuclear submarines, nuclear missiles, the triads. And these stupid, beautiful design, isn't it? Isn't that stunning? Isn't that just gorgeous? And then it's just used for nothing but evil. Like the nuclear bombers, they have the Americans, Russia and Japan or China, and quite a few countries will have nuclear weapons in the sky 24 hours a day. And in a 24-hour, they burn the same fuel, because they have to be fueled up regularly the whole time they're flying. And in 24 hours, they burn the same amount of fuel as 7 million cars. High up in your atmosphere, just puking out, because the jet engines are not very... they don't process all the fuel. A lot of it is just turned into smoke and ejected. So they come up with this crazy amount of money to design it, and build it, and test it, and refine it, re-engineer it, the most precious metals and material on the planet to get it to be invisible. You can't use it to drop nuclear weapons because that's the end of society as we know it. But they won't take the same energy and come up with solutions for energy storage when it comes to renewable. And then they call that the flaw of renewable. There's no way to store the energy because there's not enough batteries to power cities, how they like to say it. Why would you use batteries when you can use pumped hydro or compressed air, where you dig big tunnels and compress air into it? Quite a few people are doing it now, and it works for 50 years. No toxic material, and there's your peak power, right? So the national defense, the military can't survive unless it's always getting bigger. It can never stagnate. It has to get bigger every year, and it has to consume more, and it has to have an unlimited budget for its resources. And there's a lot of militaries on this planet, and they chew up all the precious metals and resources at a phenomenal weight. The way the Air Force is approaching new stealth bombers and ballistic missiles that you can't use will help sidestep cost overruns and schedule delays, and replace the aging fleets of B-1s and B-2 gas guzzlers. And the Sentinel replaced the Minuteman missiles to make up two legs of the nuclear triad, the Pentagon, which has 29,000 public relation officers. How's it going, murderers? In the nuclear phase-out, this is South Korean headlines, and they're gone crazy on the propaganda. They're literally gone batshit lunatic with their propaganda today. The new president, Yoon, no relations to Moon, campaign commitment to resume construction of their current decommissioned new reactor 3 and 4, and to export 10 nuclear reactors by 2030. But they're not going to go to Fukushima and try to resolve that, of course. Or Santa Susana or Mayak. They're going to build more misery machines, disease factories, and set them loose on the planet. Right? And then the next administration might say, well, no, cancel all that. We're getting rid of nuclear. It'll never end. He was the first president of South Korea to visit a nuclear production facility. You got to come pick up the briefcase of money yourself, sir. He became the first Korean president to go to such a plant. And it means the reversal of liberal former President Moon's ill-conceived, this is the Korean Times, by the way, to reduce the country's dependence on nuclear power. He has virtually declared Moon's policy a total failure. No, well, they had it worked out for tidal power, wind power, solar power, easy to replace as storage. He did not hesitate to denounce his Moon's nuclear phase-out policy as foolish. The media was just salivating, eh? He did not hesitate to denounce the policy as foolishness. Had he not been foolish over the past 5 years, foolish, for trying to protect the country. It further reinforced the nuclear power ecosystem, we probably would not have competitors now. Now is the time to learn from the policy failures and start all over again to get the reeling nuclear power industry back on track. This is a total fantasy, by the way. Because once you lose momentum in these big operations, you lost it for good. Yoon's scrapping of his predecessors, reckless and ideology-driven policy is a step in the right direction. The first thing Yoon should do is shake off misconceptions about nuclear power generation while still prevalent among environmental activists and liberal politicians. To shake off misconceptions. I just despise these people. They're such blatant liars. I disrespect them. Korea has already gained an international reputation for safe operation. That's not true. You've had lots of accidents. Lots and lots of accidents. We've covered them. And development of advanced technology. You haven't solved the waste. It's still hemorrhaging into the environment. It's still splitting the atom into your community and your farm fields. You lying, no good, two-timing. However, the country's nuclear energy ecosystem, there it is again, has collapsed due to the nuclear phase-out policy. Awesome. Its reactor exports have come to a halt since 2009. when Korea snatched the project of building a nuclear power station in the United Arab Emirates. So many related firms have already been driven out of business. And they claim the misguided policies also undermined energy security. Well, that was the country that supported the president. This wasn't just his doing. You low-life yellow belly. Particularly in the face of soaring oil and gas prices caused by Russia. No, you choose to stop buying oil off one of the few suppliers on the planet. That's your own fault. That's because you joined this big group of countries and militaries, and now you have no sovereignty anymore. Russia's been invading countries for as long as they existed. NATO countries were moving in. Russia told them, don't go there. That's a threat to us. We'll invade if you do that. 5 years later, no choice. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying that's how it played out. And if Russia didn't invade, then they would have bullied them. So the Prime Minister, the President of Ukraine, should have surrendered rather than destroy the infrastructure of 13 million people. Because that was the right thing. That would have been the right thing to do. Russia's like, shit, they surrendered. Particularly in the face of soaring oil and gas prices caused by Russia's invasions. But we hear that connotation worldwide in all the countries. Oh, too bad the price gone up. We can't support Russia, so we got to stop buying resources from the only country with the resources. Too bad. Lots of inflation. Don't worry, we got such a big check, it doesn't matter to us. It just affects the most vulnerable of society on a terrible scale. A growing number of countries have begun to recognize the importance of nuclear energy. U.S., really, who got 2 reactors that are 10 years overdue? Britain, which has just ridiculously most of its reactors going offline next year. It's only left with a couple of reactors. And if they stop fooling around and go ahead with renewables and compressed air storage, pumped hydro storage, which they have already, by the way, proven technology in Britain, nuclear power, of course, is not an ideal source of energy. Where the hell did that come from? Nuclear power, of course, is not an ideal source of energy. That's surreal after all the propaganda. They put that there. Of course, is not an ideal source of energy compared to renewables like solar and wind. It seems one of the most viable options to ensure a smooth energy transition. This is absurdness. And we've heard this argument a few times every month. It used to be 1 year there was almost every story would say that. Oh, nuclear would be a good energy transition. It takes you 15 or 20 years to get it. Most of them, it seems to work. Can help the country achieve its goal of net zero, which is the Alan Miles had done a paper on net zero. Was it Miles Allen or Alan Miles? I can't remember. Does it even matter? Yeah, Miles Allen. He's the physicist behind net zero. United Nations took that study and weaponized it against the population of the entire planet. And they've done the same thing with the father of global warming. He just took his paper, then used that to bludgeon the entire planet through the military-industrial complex also known as United Nations, as George Bush calls them, the New World Order. Can also help the country achieve its goal of net zero carbon emissions to fight climate change. Climate change is caused by yours truly, nuclear. I'm so confused. Radiation covers the planet. This is one of the many models of Fukushima, and the studies support these models. Unfortunately, the models don't do it justice, but an invisible cloud of death that snuffs out the life in increments over a decade or two. With a whimper, not a bang. So the country should go all out to win bids to build nuclear plants in Saudi Arabia, the Czech Republic, Poland, the US. What you're hearing in that story, that's the death knell of nuclear. That's panic. Right? The way they just framed everything there, from the biggest media in South Korea, the Korean Times, that was panic. And we see that a lot, don't we? Lately, last year in particular, you can almost smell the fear when you read the stories. The long-term future nuclear waste. Now he's in America, but he's a Filipino, I guess. Do we really want to store nuclear waste on one of our Philippine islands? This is the 35th in a series of excerpts from an ongoing book project. We've covered the majority of those excerpts. Tilting at the Monster of Mangrang. For people who want to activate the Batan, there's a Philippine nuclear power plant that they shut down because of 3 Mile Island. Right, the same year as 3 Mile Island, that was completed, but then they shut it down because of 3 Mile Island. The only future that matters is the 40-year plus it would operate, and they couldn't care less about what might happen afterwards to its lethal radioactive fuels. But I do. Climate change from extravagantly burning fossil fuel, and so people that are meanwhile are forced to regurgitate this narrative because they can't rationalize the reality. And I can do it for you, though. I can take it to another level. Hang on. So first off, fossil fuel, if your gas plant, coal plant, oil plant breaks down, doesn't create a plume that covers the planet in a continuous plume of energy, of radioactive fallout for millions of years. And let me explain what that really means to you, because this stuff sequesters, but it's not like a single plume, it's a continuous plume. So it's kind of weird to wrap your mind around. So let's look at this study in Japan of cities that are not abandoned, and average absorbed doses to the red bone marrow for adults, excluding evacuated areas. The average disposition of cesium in the soil. So this line right here, the middle line is the population of the communities. And this line, though, is how many cesium-137 only. There's 100 times more strontium there. After 1,000 days, strontium increases by 1,000% for 10,000 years or something. So 3 years after the meltdowns, strontium went and started being produced in overdrives from the curium. So 137 cesium. So when you look at these communities, think this row here is the average disposition of cesium in each community. So 21,000 atomic decays per minute per square meter in the whole communities. So all of these communities were supposed to be evacuated. But that's the reality of it is you got to be looking for curium isotopes. They're the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. And the curium isotopes, you want lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Right, so you can see all these communities over there, the population in that row, and the actual atomic decays of just gamma emitting cesium-137. They're not looking for neutrons or alphas or betas. They're just looking at cesium-137. They're only looking for, not looking really for nothing, but they only talk about cancer. But there's 1,800 illnesses. So when you look at the big list of all these communities, pulse and energy, every square meter, every second, it kills the bacteria and the fungus and the trees and the plants and the soil in increments, right? And then the plants and trees and bushes and fruit trees and everything else can't function without the bacteria. So they're becoming more susceptible to parasites and the vegetation. And the species, of course, are living like all the ants and insects and birds and mammals and animals and all these communities. So it's not just going to be the communities, it's everything in between communities too. So all the birds and insects and ants and animals are living directly in that environment. Per square meter, they're being pounded with, and this is just acknowledging gamma. And just one gamma. So it's not really acknowledging gamma per se, because it only acknowledges one. And so when I talk about these plumes covering your planet, this is what you got to remember is going on, right? Now all of a sudden, all your forests and gardens and estuaries and farms are saturated with more than just cesium-137. And a study out of Ottawa showed 220 million atoms per liter. How many liters of rainfall falls per meter? And there's no way Japan didn't get the xenon-133, which is what I was just talking about. Long-term fate of the stored nuclear waste, spontaneous fission. So putting this stuff down in the boreholes invites to guarantee you're going to have spontaneous combustion, criticality from the stuff you're storing. It's just when are you going to have it? And is it going to come back to the surface or end up in the water tables? But it is going to melt down. The minute that you don't have control of it, it's going to melt down. If you keep it at the surface, it's all split in the atoms that's vented into the environment all day long. This is what they want. Otherwise, they would have come up with a solution by now. So they took all the smartest people on the entire planet for 70 years in every major institution, university, every think tank, every government agency, every laboratory, and their solution is going to dig a big hole in the ground and put the nuclear waste down there. If you get permission from the community, you're going to put it in. Why are you putting it in the community for? Nuclear scientists, Los Alamos National Laboratory of all places in 1996, described how natural or unnatural processes underground could mobilize even small packages of waste into critical masses to spontaneously fission. And if Los Alamos don't know, then who knows? I wonder, because they're experts in nuclear meltdowns contaminating the environment. Amounts as small as 2 kilograms of water present in varying degrees, all categories of waste containing fissile isotopes appear to be susceptible to these, what they call a criticality excursion, is a nuclear chain, uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction. what we call a meltdown. They also described how the plutonium nuclear waste can become weapons grade simply by sitting in storage. So if this is your 5th day in a row at my videos, then you are by definition hardcore anti-nuclear. You are hardcore. Because after 5 days, I don't blame you if you never come back. I really don't. Because it's such a bizarre subject and it's such a just holy shit moments constantly, you know? And then the perpetual cover-up and lies from so many facets of society, from all the universities, from all the major media, from all the technical media, participate in the deception at on the drop of a hat. Universities and media ready to come out and do a cover-up. If you have a meltdown in the current times we are now, and the media is instructed to ignore it, it'll be radio silence worldwide. And every story will have the same picture with the same paragraph by the same authors. It's called brainwashing well, there's actually, I can't remember. They used to do these experiments in the 40s, 50s, and 60s on humans. They also described the plutonium. We already covered that. Nuclear waste could become weapons grade simply by sitting around. You folks are hardcore if you're here 5 days in a row, folks. Let's keep it rolling here because this stuff never stops, does it? About 1% of the spent fuel consists of 5 main isotopes of plutonium, which meant there was around 24,000 pounds of plutonium at Fukushima, by the way. We can ignore, and that is gone, released into the environment, which is just oh shit stuff. That's a guaranteed extinction event. We can ignore the minor amounts of plutonium-238 and 15% of plutonium-241 that decay rapidly compared to the other isotopes only. And the 5% plutonium-242, because its half-life is 374,000 years. What concerns us is the 53% that is plutonium-239 and the 25% of plutonium-240. And we cover 240, 239. And I'll show you some of them. Hang on, we've already, I think, showed one. And an americium 240, 241, that decays in the plutonium. Of course, you can't find it when you want it. You can only find it when you don't want it. Oh, that's because, here we go. Is this americium or plutonium? As neptunium-239 decays into plutonium-239. And then what was this was TEPCO's model. What was the plutonium model? It was 239. And what did he say about 239? What concerns us are the 53% that is the plutonium-239, which is this model here, the radioactive fallout covering the planet. That's just that particular isotope. That's just so heartbreaking. 239 has a half-life of 24,000 years. And they use it in weapons. 240 has a half-life of 6,500 years. So it's not safe for weapons because it fissions spontaneously too often. Because not everything follows that mathematical equation. Some might not fission for 30,000 years instead of 24,000 before it decays to another isotope. Because they decay to 10 different isotopes right before it becomes lead, so to speak, right? Radioactive, but still radioactive lead. It's not normal everyday lead, it's anthropogenic man-made lead. So you got nuclear waste stored all over the country, splitting the atoms, hemorrhaging into the environment all day long. Like, you take the fuel that's going to power 1 million homes, 2 million homes, and it does this by splitting atoms. But it's contained, Dana. Yeah, really? Until you change the fuel and open it up, right? That's okay because we bring in 1,000 outside workers. And then they go away after all the radiation escapes. Then our regular workers go back. And what was the point I'm trying to make? So each fuel pool, when you add, each day it's releasing the atoms for the power of 1 million homes. Well, 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. That's not enough to boil a glass of water either. But if it gets in your body, or insects or birds or animals or man or species, their body attacks the white blood cells for the rest of their life and tries to build a tumor around it. Every single one of them. It's very bad for a very long time. Yeah, the MOX fuel is just horrific. I actually got a story about MOX fuel coming up tonight. But the reactor 3 in Japan was mixed oxide fuel. So normally radiation is described by the government this way, that man-made radioactive isotopes are 1 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And just because it's gone through a chain reaction, you completely changed the properties. Now, if you take it and put it through a chain reaction again, which is known as mixed oxide fuel, MOX fuel, it's 1 billion times more toxic. So it's very lethal to all the species, very energetic. Everything is a hot particle. And that's the worst case scenario, by the way, hot particles. Everything from a nuclear meltdown is basically a hot particle. That's the better way to think of it. Yoon slams Moon's nuclear phase out as idiotic. He pledges to reinvest in nuclear power until the next person is elected and says, no, we're not going to do it. There's no reason to do it. This is strictly posturing. They don't have the technology anymore. They don't have the workers anymore. They don't have the skill anymore. They don't have the know-how anymore. It's just posturing. But it's dangerous posturing. You're holding up the planet hostage instead of coming up with solutions for everything else. You want to sharpen your skills? Get your ass to the nuclear industry from South Korea down to Fukushima. Nuclear power industry is on the verge of withering and dying. So during the Olympics, South Korea was going to send radiation detectors and their own food with the athletes because Japan was radioactive. So this shit for brains, current president in South Korea, refuses to acknowledge there's any adverse side effects. There's no guarantee the industry will survive. The nuclear power industry is on the verge of withering and dying, and there's no guarantee the industry will survive even if we shower it with aid. So again, what we're seeing being framed is panic. This, again, is in a different country than the previous story I showed you, is panic. That's panic. It's 100% panic. I mean, that's pretty honest too, right? Nuclear power industry is on the verge of withering and dying in South Korea. And there's no guarantee the industry can survive, even with the president behind it. So sad. You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing fuck you, Nuke. Nuclear power industry is waging a propaganda war. The Scotchman. Here's why it should have no place in our energy future. I like them already. Don't nuke our future. That actually had Greenpeace underneath our future, and I scrubbed it out because I can't stand Greenpeace. They sold us out, right? It is what it is. Reports on the weekend revealed the scale of nuclear industry lobbying of the MSPs, the ministers, and politicians. Sadly for them, nuclear reactors across Europe are increasingly showing the folly of relying on complex, always late and eye-watering, expensive technology for power. Yeah, France got over half their nuclear fleet is offline because of flaws and everything else. So they built all the reactors at one time, and they're all coming back to haunt them at the same time, which is awesome. If anybody deserves to be haunted, France does. You go look at what they've done to Niger to get the uranium, the cheap uranium from Niger. They destroyed the country. Civil war destroyed every community. All the natural resources. Got rid of the functional government, armed the opposition, and carried out civil war. They got 7,000 soldiers down there at any given time. All about getting their hands on high-grade uranium to fuel their disgusting nuclear crackhead habit. For the Scottish Labourers, the SNP Tory parties have heard from the industry at 6 private meetings. 6 private meetings for the nuclear industry lobbyists and government officials. That's sedition, by the way. The industry has been successful at lobbying the UK government. Well, just because the UK government is doing the same thing, panicking, we're going to build all kinds of reactors. That was Boris Johnson, right? Used the pretext of war in Ukraine to make the insane promise they would build a reactor a year for the next 8 years. You can't build a reactor in a year. They can't build, like, Sizewell C is, or Hinkley Point C is 10 years behind schedule, and Sizewell C will be 20 years behind schedule. It'll be redundant in 6 years, in 4 years, because of the renewable technologies have exploded now. I think we're truly seeing the industry having nervous breakdowns, basically. Hard to see how any interpretation of this commitment could be delivered when nuclear power plants take a decade or more to build, even after objections have been dealt with. They can't in a decade. I think 1 out of 10 maybe in a decade they can build. The lobbyists, which is supposed to be legal under the Magna Carta, the constitutions and the Canadian Bill of Rights, have also persuaded the European Commission to try to label nuclear power as green. 2 committees of MEPs voted against that change last week. Right, they created the EU taxonomy to label green technology for investment to save money and earn money better, see? And the first thing they wanted to label green was nuclear power. The idea of the EU taxonomy was to exclude nuclear because it's not green. And nuclear is so greedy, the renewables can't survive, see? And they took over that too. Meanwhile, in the real world, a new Finnish reactor in Olkiluoto, which we've covered several times, has had a further delay. They actually had a leak there, right? And they covered it up. We covered that. My frog in my throat, hang on. Need a bucket there, the big old loogies into. That's a joke. Not a good one either. Meaning it may eventually, not really though, meaning it may eventually feed actual electrons into the power grid in December, 13 years later than planned, at 4 times the original cost. That don't make you, if you're in that country, that should make you literally cry. And it's the first new reactor to be completed in Europe for 15 years. The previous one in Romania was officially under construction for 24 years. Watts-Bar was 40-something years, 42 years, was it? For one of Watts-Bar's reactors. The industry's insane. Construction of 2 reactors, Hinkley Point in Somerset, continued. But last month, energy company EDF, which don't have the manpower to build those reactors, let alone new ones in France, and they're French government, basically, admitted the proposed start date, because United Kingdom nuclear industry is too stupid to do it, which is excellent, by the way, that the proposed start date has slipped once again to June 2027, 10 years later than originally proposed. So I was thinking about this. The costs have risen again to over $25 billion from original price tag of $18 billion. It's got a long way to go yet, buddy. Hinkley Point C. Look at this carbon-free site with all the precious metals. Everything is inspected 3 separate times. You got 8,000 people driving big guzzlers to the site every day, far away. And it's surrounded by farms, as far as you can see. Right up to the nuclear plant itself. So the design calls for to be completely enveloped in farms. This is meant to poison you. That's why they do this, right? Because the food gets shipped out all the time, right? And that stops the bioaccumulation of huge numbers around there. And then everything is downhill, so the rest of it washes down to the ocean. How evil is that? That's the future nuclear power plant, Hinkley Point. But there's also Sizewell C. So if you look up pictures of Sizewell C, most pictures are like this or this here. But look at the pictures up in the corner. Right? Surrounded by farms. So when you put them together, that's Sizewell C. When you put them together, the 2 new plants they want to build there are both surrounded by farms to poison you with. Because they love you so much. That's murder. That's murder, see? That's purpose murder. They're attempting to murder you in increments with bioaccumulation. That's 100% murder to do that. It is obvious the new nuclear has no place in our energy future. And despite the obvious truth, the nuclear industry continues to flog the dead horse with their myths about costs and their propaganda about small reactors that aren't small and their blatant reassurances about waste. And the money and political capital they are throwing at this would be much better spent making sure renewables expand at the fastest possible rate. Right? We could have done this 30 years ago. We should have. We could have, easily. And you would hope the Scottish politicians gave the lobbyists a short shrift in their recent meetings. He's an environmental campaigner and consultant. EDF reportedly ready to pull out of Sizewell C. This is blackmail. Because they're about to make a decision, right? And then all of a sudden, EDF, you're not going to give us all kinds of free billions of dollars. We're going to pull out because you can't do it yourself. China, they're gone. Unions have warned that the UK's nuclear future will be at risk if the government investment decisions for the project is delayed. If the government doesn't, this is pure blackmail. They're blackmailing United Kingdom is what they're up to, EDF. Well, that's the French. What do you expect, right? EDF is allegedly ready to walk away from the Sizewell C nuclear plant. That's Sizewell C. That's their picture. Surrounded by farms. That's their picture in the media. That's how brainwashing works, eh? And nobody questions that. Nobody's like, huh? Why are you building a disease factory in a farmland for? You know, and all the food's going to get radioactive all the time for decades and decades and decades, and everybody who buys it at the supermarket are going to get sick eventually from it, especially the kids. Oh, it's okay. It looks pretty, surrounded by farms. Pretty murderous. Some of the United Kingdom's biggest unions, the biggest unions, think about that statement too, sent a letter pumping for nuclear, warning the future of the plant will be in jeopardy if the government doesn't give them all the money that they got in their piggy bank. It has been reported that the EDF, these are buffoons, by the way, the EDF, internal funding for Sizewell C could run out in a matter of weeks. That's blackmail you're talking about, folks. We sincerely believe that unless this matter is resolved in the next few weeks, the UK nuclear future and the jobs and skills of tens of thousands of scumbag nuclear workers will be at risk. Aww. It's so sad you don't get to murder all your friends and your loved ones who eat the food for decades and decades and decades. Like, how is it that nobody else on the planet is asking that question? I wonder, why the hell are you building disease factories and farmlands for? Nuclear engineering. My God, they are revolting, eh? Just a lot, whoever these people are, they never put their names on the article, but they're vicious scum. Nuclear Engineering International, Nuclear Extermination of Humanity International, new built bringing more women into nuclear engineering. This is United Kingdom story, that's right. So, Sizewell C were committed to increasing the percentage of women. We're developing targeted outreach, economically disadvantaged and hard to reach groups. So they're looking for people with autism to work in the nuclear industry, basically. Because they do that, right? They become really fixated on what they're doing. It can't be an accident because we see it all the time. FEMA seeks public comment. Great job, FEMA. That's something they'll never hear, right? Nuclear emergency alert. Now, they want to go digital. Call everybody on their cell phone. The activists are the reasons they have sirens, usually about 100 within 10 miles of the disease factories known as nuclear power plants. And they'll use the results to make his decision on... So the problem with the sirens or the cell phones is, well, first off, the problem with the emergency alert system is they're not going to use it if there's a meltdown. It's completely there involuntarily because of activists made them put it there. And then your cell phones, the siren, everybody would hear it, right? Because I don't always take my cell phone with me, particularly because I'm stalked by the nuclear industry pretty regularly. So taking my cell phone means they're going to know where I'm to at all times. FEMA will use the exercise. And they're showing us Virginia's electric power company, Surrey Power Station in Virginia, a decrepit old disease factory. Because you get heart problems, liver problems, lung problems. Department of Homeland Security, my God. So Homeland Security when they were building that. Remember, they used to advertise on pizza boxes and coffee cups. They don't have law enforcement benefits for starters, right? Or pensions or anything else. They can't arrest you. They got to call the cops to arrest you. And that their authority is administrative, not legislative. FEMA is seeking the public's comment on the proposed plan change to replace sirens with wireless emergency alerts via cell phones as the primary alert notification system. I don't care what they do because they're not going to use it if they have an accident. There's simply zero possibility they're going to use it. Bulgaria nuclear reactor shuts down after technical glitch. Said no increase in radiation. But they're having a lot of technical glitches. Reactors shut down. And this is what they always do. They go, there's no increase in radiation. Have a nice day. That's the stupidest story of the week. A man who fell in love with Chernobyl nuclear power plant proposes outside of reactor 4. He went back. It's even worse than that. He actually does Chernobyl tours. And because of the war, now he wants to do Fukushima tours. So he wants to keep going back to a nuclear wasteland to make a few dollars. TEPCO will hire you and pay you a lot more, probably. Radiation can't hurt you if you're watching this. You'll be okay. You go take that job. And you get an extra $5 a day if you don't take your badge with you when you go to work. Such a sad story that people are so gullible. But the problem is he's killing other people. I'll show you. So he popped the question outside of reactor 4. A thrill-seeking Brit at the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster. A 200-ton reactor. Brand new, by the way. Each of Fukushima reactors were 720 tons, 800 assemblies. And the fuel's at the top of the building, decades of it. So each reactor dwarfs Fukushima. And so what they have for the scale is deception. Chernobyl can't. It's brutal, don't get me wrong. Go look at my presentations on Chernobyl from this year. You'll see what I mean. We covered briefly 600 academic studies. If you really want to get an insight to what a nuclear accident looks like, go watch my Chernobyl video where I jogged through 600 academic studies in a couple hours. It'll really tell you that this is madness. When they returned to the nuclear site in December to run their own tour, he decided it was time to get down on one knee and pop the question. And look at him. As the impersonal clicks of James's Geiger counter rose as he paused outside of reactor 4, so did his heart rate as he waited patiently for an answer. So when he stopped in front of reactor 4, the Geiger counter started screeching. And he thought that was appropriate time to pop the question. It's just disappointing there's that many stupid people on the planet. The couple got married in the nuclear wasteland, and Kyiv gets incredibly radioactive every time there's a forest fire at Chernobyl. 2 days before the Russian invasion, planned to visit the hermit state of North Korea to celebrate the nuptials, going on a honeymoon in North Korea. You're the definition of a weirdo, buddy. So we didn't have any tourists with us, and we're going to Chernobyl for the day. Why would you do something like that? You really think you're invisible? You really think you're smarter than everybody? And I thought, should I propose to her? So we ran around Kiev in the morning trying to find a ring and stuff. I found one. We went to the reactor. I got down on one knee. I'm officially a moron. He said the radiation from many parts of the zone are the same for anywhere else in the world. That's an absurd suggestion. They actually closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and in Scotland and United Kingdom 3,000 miles away. It's just scary how stupid people are. It's just scary how stupid these people are. So instead of going to Chernobyl next time, how about going down to some of the orphanages for the Chernobyl children? Tell them how beautiful it was down there. Pinhead. It's just disappointing that people like that are so detached from reality. They closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and Scotland, United Kingdom. I'll show you a headline about radioactive fallout. Human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing, suggesting it changed. A lot of these studies are suggesting that Chernobyl changed the sex ratio of everybody in Europe. More males than females being born, so it meant everybody got poisoned. But you can't do that without poisoning all the species, you know. The species. They closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom. But they're going to try to convince you that the radiation levels are, for many parts of the zone, the same for anywhere else in the world. It's just, I don't like saying I want to punch somebody in the head, but I want to punch this asshole in the head. On a one-day tour to Chernobyl, you get the same radiation as you would in an hour at a jet line. These got nothing to do with each other. Completely opposite. At Chernobyl, you don't wear a face mask on to stop the sunshine. You know, natural emitters, right? So Chernobyl, these face masks won't stop it, by the way. But Chernobyl, for instance, you're breathing in atoms, and they sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your bones for the rest of your life. Your body attacks it with white blood cells. That permanently displaces red blood cells to carry oxygen and nutrition. Now, when you get in a plane, you go up in the sky, then you come back down. You're not breathing, well, you are now because of Fukushima, but you're not breathing theoretically. To say that is just despicable. So you can go into the control room for reactor 4, and you limit 10 minutes in there because you're breathing, ingesting radiation. Like, if you're limited because of anthropogenic man radiation, you do not want to go in that environment. You get this into your body, then all the money you make taking tours, you got to spend it trying to stay alive for the rest of your life. You're literally... He works as a tour operator, runs his own business, contamination zone. So why did the media put him on a pedestal, right? Because, and of course the Mirror, these are disgusting. Rupert Murdoch, when little children would go missing, he would hack their telephones and read through the messages, and he would delete some messages on the recordings, waiting for somebody to call in looking for him. These were children that were kidnapped and raped and murdered. And then they would run headlines that only an insider with the phone would know, right? This was at the News of the World. This is why they closed down News of the World, because about 2 billion people worldwide made YouTube and Twitter sites, channels, just to yell at Rupert Murdoch when he found out what he was doing. But that's what the nuclear industry is like all the time. They're just incredibly evil. It's like if you hire good people for the nuclear industry, it's still a despicable industry. But if people were responsible, right, we might have been able to coexist. Not likely. But they've never tried to come up with solutions in the nuclear industry. They want the fuel to continue to split in the atoms into the environment. The fuel pools are the Achilles heel of 8 million species right now. Together to take tourists to the historical sites, spending most of the time taking people to the iconic spots for Instagram selfies, and insist it's perfectly safe despite the fact that it's absolutely unequivocally can't be, and it's not. He said it's completely safe, absolutely. When you can't quantify those assertions, you can't back that up with documentation. It's impossible. It can't be safe. It's a nuclear meltdown site. Stupid. Maybe not so much right now, but radiation-wise, it's perfectly safe to go to Chernobyl. He said maybe not so much because of the war, is what he's saying there, but radiation-wise, it's perfectly safe to go to Chernobyl. And that's despicable. That's absolutely reprehensible that the Mirror published this incredible, dangerous propaganda. He said, I've said to people that you're more likely to be killed by a building falling on top of you than you are for radiation. So he runs on the premises that if he doesn't feel or physically have a reaction, that the radiation didn't harm them. And the nuclear industry thrives on this complacency. The entire zone is a wildlife reserve of migratory animals, is what he's talking about. Wolves, foxes, horses, deers. Somebody's seen a bear, Dana. I seen an idiot. And there's no mistaking it. The pair are now safely, think of that word there, safely back in London. I think media is disgusting. My goodness. Whoever wrote this story, they probably had to go home and drink a 40-ouncer and take pills after. They usually come from 1 or 2 days to just sit with their binoculars being happy. They're talking about bird watchers going into a nuclear wasteland. It's just garbage. Oh, this a fusion company is going to make a garage-sized nuclear fusion reactor without the magnets. No, I agree with you. Total bullshit. 100% I agree. And then interesting engineers who, these are incredible lapdogs for the nuclear industry we've seen over the years. Could it be the answer to our fossil fuel addiction? First off, like it's fusion, so shut up. It's a waste of time. Why don't you take all these people and go solve Fukushima and energy storage for renewables? Stupid. They are cheaper, don't require large, incredible, powerful magnets. A practically limitless energy source that doesn't exist. It doesn't even exist. The technology was thought up in 1950, by the way, of somebody else, of course. And that's what we see with these new startups. They're always going on old technologies, old patents. They're not innovative, see? Got $160 million in funding in the round. So they all got new toys. Everybody's happy. Congress to restore nuclear cruise missile funds. Nuclear cruise missile. The Pentagon, the crazies, plan to estimate a nuclear tipped. They never found no bodies, no seats, no luggage. Never even found sneakers at the Pentagon after 9/11. Or in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. No bodies, no seats, no wings, no engines, no wheels. They totally staged it and got away with it. This is slated for cancellation under the Pentagon's recent nuclear posture review. Approved $45 million for the new cruise missiles were nuclear-tipped. Nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. Nuclear-tipped. It's not nuclear tip, it's nuclear weapon. It's a nuclear bomb. Calling it nuclear tipped is like... Killing the missile would save about $200 million this year, $2.1 billion over the next 5 years. Or 4 years. It's surreal, isn't it? Armed with a yellow or low-yield nuclear warhead. Low-yield. Nuclear warhead. Savages. You can't even use them. You can make your stupid little toys. Just don't put no nuclear bombs in it. You're never going to use it. A Pentagon study. It's just... I really think the Pentagon is not going to be pro. It's going to be needed to respond rapidly expanding Chinese and Russian forces, says the Pentagon study. Okay. The serial killer said, well, I had to kill her. She's seen my face. Can't blame me for that. That's what the Pentagon says all the time, right? The missile will give an adversary pause in a crisis, provide the president with a wider range of options in deterring a nuclear conflict. You can say that about anything. You just build a catapult and say it's the same thing about it. Deterring a nuclear conflict by setting off a small, low-yield nuclear weapon. Huh? No, that's not double talk at all. Remember Patrick Clausen. It's hard to see how this president can get us to war with Iran. It's best if somebody else starts the war. So attack themselves, blame it on Iran is what they're talking about. Blow up another twin tower and blame it on Iran. The missile also would bolster extended deterrence for U.S. allies. So now they're talking about as a deterrent for their allies, give their allies these small, low-yield nuclear weapons. Like Israel. BN 800 fast reactor fully loaded with MOX fuel. It's worse than that. It's worse than that. Hang on, I'll get there. So this unit was disconnected from major repairs. Now they're going to burn full MOX. What we got done there? Okay, they're going to burn. Because it's either that one. I kind of partial to this one, the old alien hand. The BN 800 fast reactor. Now, this is the first time that a fast reactor, has used mixed oxide fuel. And where the hell is this to, Dana? Russia. So their mixed fuel would have came from the Mayak, because the Mayak produces the majority of the mixed oxide fuel in Russia. Australia's nuclear past and future. It's interesting because they don't mention Britain going down there and setting off 700 dirty bombs. and multiple nuclear weapons, and waiting for the winds to blow across Australia before they done such dastardly deeds. Australia's complex relationship with nuclear conveniently left out everything about it. From uranium mining through to current defense policies. What about the nuclear war they had down there where Britain came down and went to war against Australia, who has the largest cancer rate per 100,000 people worldwide? But I got nothing to do with all the dirty bombs the United Kingdom set off down there and didn't clean up any of it. Literally spit on the Australians when they left. New 416-mile transmission project could support Wyoming nuclear carbon capture. No, you didn't mishear me. That's what it said. They get a $3 million nuclear grant here, $5 million nuclear grant here, grant everywhere, grant. I don't know, I couldn't read anything. So the industry is always handing out money to the institutions. The institutions become addicted to multi-million-dollar handouts pretty quickly, you know. Pang addresses historic and nuclear injustice in the Pacific. And they don't let you right-click on their site. How's the poll going tonight, anyway? Hi, everybody. How the hell did we get 11% of people says Congress and Parliament shouldn't have the authority to make it a crime to poison you with nuclear fallout? Who the hell in their right mind voted no to that? How does that even work? Should Congress and Parliament have the authority to make it a crime to poison you with nuclear fallout? Well, there's only one possible answer. It has to be yes. Only the Nuclear Regulatory Authority has the nuclear regulatory agencies has the authority. And there's zero possibility that they're going to not make it a crime. That they're going to make it a crime to poison. There's zero possibility. So you got all these beautiful atolls that were blown up by the nuclear industry. The French Polynesian Islands by France, and Sahara Desert, of course, and Niger. You have the British destroyed Christmas Island, a beautiful, wonderful oasis, now radioactive for millions of years. And also Australia, of course. And then the Americans, crazies, went down to the Marshall Islands, where they have over 1 million square kilometers of radioactive ocean, radioactive seafloor for 1 million square kilometers. You know, one of the Americans, the Bravo test, was equal to over 1,000 Hiroshima bombs going off at one time. The same amount of radiation. They've done it many underwater nuclear detonations where the sulfur was converted into peroxide hydrogen buckyballs that were able to uptake hot particles and become liberated into the environment to hunt down and kill the species. 700 jobs planned, backed by Copeland Council and nuclear bosses. Look at the beautiful building they want to build. Nuclear industry is just incredibly deceitful and dishonest and evil, man. Surreal how evil the nuclear industry. To receive funding support from the Nuclear Decommission Authority, the non-decommission authority, I should say. 2.3 million pounds from Sellafield Social Impact Fund. Did you hear that? 2.3 million from Sellafield Social Impact Fund. Sellafield is surrounded by farms. They've been poisoning people for 60 odd years there. It's like MIA, the MI5 should go to Sellafield and take it over, like they've done at Rocky Flats with the FBI. The NDA funding will support the redevelopment of Leakenfield industrial estates into an enterprise campus. And I don't know much about that, but I'm assuming it's not good. The NDA, Sellafield, and Sellafield have given our programs the support and money in preparation for ramping down of operations at Sellafield, which ultimately means a reduction in available murdering jobs at Sellafield. Don't worry, you can go over to Sizewell C and just radiate the daylights out of everybody. Manchester, I had no protection from the nuclear bombs. Test veterans fight for justice 65 years on. And it's revolting how these people, like we showed the studies years ago where they were purposely radiated so they can study them and their children over a lifetime. See? They were those Christmas Island, right? The 1950s. And they recently had a historic meeting with a prime minister. The first time in 65 years, a British prime minister would meet with the victims of nuclear testing. Imagine how pathetic that legacy actually is. So as we'll see, what you need to know is decision date on nuclear power station looms. Here's what you need to know. That they showed you this picture on the front page of the Sizewell C being surrounded by farms, and everybody like, cool. You're like, my God, are you that stupid? You don't understand? These things will be hemorrhaging radiation into the farms for 60 years plus. It'll produce enough electricity to power 6 million homes. Now, when you take the fuel out every 18 months and put it in a pool, it's still producing the same atoms for 6 million homes. They're released into the environment to poison the people in the 6 million homes. Then the next day it's going to do the same thing again. You got any idea how many atoms each day it takes to make the power for 6 million homes? You got any idea what that does to your health over a decade or two? Released into the environment. Once they take it out, after 18 months, it goes in a fuel pool. It's splitting the atom all day into your community and your farmlands. It's really something. I'm not telling you because I'm bored. I'm telling you because you need to wake up and gut up, and you need to have a conversation. You need to make a stand. You need to gut up. You need to get busy. You need to put an end to this. This is everywhere. On top of that, has to, like, we do these shows for so many years now. I've lost track of how many shows, and we do research expeditions too, right? Right now, my health got compromised, and it could be a very bad year for Dana coming up. We got DCA is on the way to the rescue. I got enough, we got 100 grams coming in. It's already gone through customs. And that's going to change the game. The man entrusted to make the biggest planning call in Suffolk for a generation, the Secretary of State. So a single person can make the decision on whether you're poisoned all day, every day for the rest of your life by nuclear. It's some scary, scary fact, isn't it? Groups such as Together Against Sizewell C, bless their hearts, have been highly critical of the prospect of a new nuclear power station at Sizewell, suggesting the $20 billion required to build the disease factory should be invested in renewable energy instead. Yeah. Like if they took $20 million to come up with storage, compressed air storage and stuff like this, you're just compressing air into tunnels. You can dig tunnels anywhere. There's low pressure tunnels, and the air expands when it comes out. It's a brilliant idea, and it solves the renewable storage immediately. It's stupid, simple to do, obsolete technology, And if they spent a lousy billion on it, they could master it. However, the EDF website claims the project will increase biodiversity around the power station by 19%. Really? Well, let's look at some other power plants, shall we? Indian Point, how nuclear kills fish. Nuclear kills fish many different ways, the nuclear power plants. These facilities kill more than 17 billion fish each year in New York and another 9 billion in New Jersey. 26 billion a year of fish, like big fish. National Marine Fisheries Services found that the once-through cooling systems are vacuuming up trillions of newly hatched fish and destroying them in the heat exchangers. Trillions. That there's strong evidence decline in the fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destructions of those fish, baby fish, than the overfishing of adults by the commercial fleets. And that the Indian plant on the Hudson River sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water daily. And every glass of water has 1 billion creatures in it. Do the math. Eggs and larvae. Killing about 2 billion juvenile fish on top of that and mature fish a year in its screens. And then the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, estimated more than 300 billion baby fish are killed each year when they're sucked into the 40-foot wide intake pipes. If they don't get life there, they'll destroy you in your supermarkets by growing it in a nuclear wasteland. Welcome to the New World Order. But no, EDF, which has the credibility of a pond leech. Japan's government not responsible for damage caused by Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. And you know why? Well, they had a projection of a tsunami, but this tsunami came from a different direction. And so therefore, they don't have to pay the victims. Because their plan, they prepared for the tsunami to come from one direction instead of... They're on the coastline. You'd think they would plan for a tsunami from a 180-degree direction because they live in a tsunami zone with thousands of years of history. But that's not how it works in that world. So Washington law gets ahead of the Supreme Court in the Hanford case, which was now reinforced. Washington law passed last spring nullified Tuesday's U.S. Supreme Court ruling against the 2018 state law that made it easier for Hanford employees to collect workers' compensations. Because the legislators already fixed the issues. So 2018 Washington law covered by Tuesday ruling required the state and Department of Labor and Industries to assume cancers, neurological problems, respiratory illnesses claimed by past or current employees of Hanford contractors can be linked to chemicals, pollutants in the Western Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere. So workers do not have to prove that the illnesses were not caused by factors outside of the 584 square mile site. So that's not it. The Senate passed the bill 32-17. All the no votes came from Republicans. I'm looking for something here. Hang on. I didn't throw it. Hang on. I got it on my desktop here. What they were talking about think I got it right here. Yeah. So this original story. Yeah, this original story. Feds double down on ill Hanford workers' court ruling. To qualify for compensation at Hanford, a worker only needs to be employed at work area at Hanford for a single 8-hour shift. So if you worked at Hanford for a lousy 8 hours, you're entitled to a pension if you got sick, because you worked in a nuclear wasteland. That's how safe and wonderful nuclear is. If you work there for 8 hours, you get a pension. And then when people say there's no evidence nuclear can cause harm, this has already gone through the Supreme Court. You say, well, if you work at Hanford 8 hours, you get sick 20 years down the road, you don't have to prove it caused at Hanford. It's assumed. That's pretty cool. The government fought that tooth and nail for 4 years. But it just went through the Supreme Courts. What the Fukushima? UK to lift restrictions on food imports from a nuclear wasteland. 55 countries banned the food in Japan from 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima, for over a decade. Canada lifted all restrictions after 93 days. We just passed the 11th anniversary of lifting all restrictions. That's the gallows laugh, by the way. It's not safe to go to the supermarket in Newfoundland or anywhere else in Canada. United Kingdom lifting all restrictions on food from a nuclear wasteland. That's the definition of evil. The closing statement from the Conference on Humanitarian Impacts of Nuclear Weapons. And they don't mention Fukushima, radioactive fallout, poisoning the entire biosphere a single time. That's a crime on its own, isn't it? That's humiliating. That's embarrassing. That's nuclear. That's the nuclear industry. That's what they do. Hi, we look like you, we dress like you, but we hate your guts and your kids and all the species' guts. We are here to kill you. That's the nuclear we all know and love. The hate. Well, that's it, I suppose. That's 5 days in a row. That's pretty good. We had no Geiger counter tonight because I forgot to drop the battery in the charger again. I don't understand that because I'm pretty reliable, right? Hell of a tough week doing all these shows, trying to get... But that's how you do it. You got to grind through it. The problem is the nuclear industry just lies all day, every day. What we try to do is challenge the lies among everything else, right? Educate the program. Educate the population that happens to come by. Hopefully, the policymakers and investors. We're censored heavily, so don't let the numbers on my video reflect the actual true numbers. These are incredible, degenerate scum that shouldn't exist. They should be tried with crimes against humanity. The same with the people that lifted all restrictions on Japanese food after 93 days in Canada should be. They're currently in positions of authority. Canadian media didn't even report on it. So Japan couldn't ship the food anywhere else, so they shipped it to Canada and poisoned everybody in Canada. And they poisoned us anyway, didn't they? Okay, well, I haven't stopped. I haven't stopped today. Long day, and I just got to be careful in everything I'm doing because we got a poll. Let's cover the poll one last time. I'm just going to click on some music here. Ooh, what was I wanted to say about the weekend? I can't remember. There was a science extravaganza going on here in Newfoundland a week, and I wanted to go spend a day there, but it's quite a ways away. Might be an opportunity to switch off for me, but who knows? Let me see, what else have I got? I got the music going. Let's come in and cover the poll. We got 48 votes. Really? 10% said that Congress and parliaments worldwide shouldn't have the authority to make it a crime to poison you with nuclear fallout. My God, they're savages tonight, eh? Well, too bad. Yeah, thanks, Dana and Asana. Good night, everybody. Adam, thank you. You're welcome. Don Vincent. Richard. Get my eyes to work here. Darlene. Conrad. Felix. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Hardcore. Day old P. You folks are hardcore, man. Anybody that can sit through 5 of my grueling videos, because it's grueling for me to put this together. It's a silly amount of work. But if nobody else is going to do it, well, what am I supposed to do? Port Angeles. Good night, everybody. Have a great night and a great weekend. Lester's breaking news. Ski Villa, which is my brain is just shot. Called into the show last night. Shayla White. Stephen Young. James Lucid. Good night, everybody. I don't expect people to be able to keep up with me. I'm a different type of animal when it comes to hunting the nuclear industry. I don't take time off. John Curtis, I can't stand taking time off is what I should say. It's not a game to me, right? This is not a game. This is real as it gets. We're the difference between life and death for the future generation. This is Earth's last stand, and you are now part of it. I hope everybody... And it's such a tough subject for the average person. It's not though, right? There's all endless documentation, endless information every single show. Andrew B. Hi, Andrew. Just scrolling up through the names here. Back going, instead of coming down, because I usually scroll all the way up to whatever is aggregated, because not all the comments will be aggregated in my side panel. No, Colette. S is out there. Good night, Colette. Swanee D. Good morning, Swanee D. will be here tomorrow morning. Stephen Young was here 5 days this week. That's hardcore, Stephen. Jerry Goldstein. Marge Vincent. Hi, Marge. I was thinking about you today, wondering where you were to. Who else we got here? almost all the way up. We go all the way up and come backwards. That's it. I pretty well got... I always seem to miss one or two people. I don't know how that's even possible, but I always seem to miss one or two people. I'll remind people that if you don't donate, nobody does. We're a long way from reaching our goals. And so I gotta ask. Forgive me, but I have to ask people, even if people can't donate or don't. I still gotta ask, because if I don't, the whole operation falls flat on its face, right? And so nobody else is gonna ask. I better ask, otherwise it can't happen. So don't be offended or worry about it. I have to do it, right? If I don't do it, I'll regret it all weekend. The two links from the very bottom of the descriptions are the only two ways you can donate to me. Never been an issue with any of those. The link that goes to my site, the Nuclear Proctologist, you can donate with just about anything. Google cards, you punch it in there, it'll probably accept it from any country. There's a big list at the very bottom of different cards my site will take. It all adds up, and we got shitload of expenses to get covered. And that's how it's got to get done. And if I don't do it, I fall behind. If I fall behind, it takes forever to try to catch up. And we're behind by hundreds and hundreds at this stage. It's all good, man. We'll see everybody. Looks like we got through it all. We come back over it. Yeah, good night, everybody. Yeah, it looks good. We got 50 likes. If you're watching this video later, don't forget to give us a bit of a thumbs up. It does that sometimes. I'm still having trouble with my grading, my colors, with the lights, because we got the lights set up different. And I forgot to get on it tonight. My apologies, but have a great night, great weekend, everybody. God bless and hugs for everybody. Thank you for finding the time, the energy, and having the moral compass to come and hear me out. See everybody on Sunday at the regular time, unless there's breaking story. You have a great night, folks. Yeah, thanks, Sub-Zero. Take care, folks. See everybody soon.